The U.S. House of Representatives just passed a bill that many say could lead to the end of TikTok in the country.
The yeas are 352, the nays are 65.
I opened my phone and I'm genuinely at a loss for words for what was waiting for me.
You know what's going down when you get this notification from TikTok? Let Congress know what TikTok means for you and tell them to vote no.
TikTok rallied its fans and got them to jam the phone lines of Congress members before the vote.
Lawmakers say their phones rang off the hook.
What TikTok did on Thursday, flooding my office and other offices with calls of kids who didn't know why they were calling us, shows the kind of control that they have.
But even still, the House voted overwhelmingly in favor of the bill. So what does that mean? This 12-page bill, formally called the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, doesn't equate to an immediate ban on TikTok, but it would give the president the power to designate social media apps with ties to foreign governments a national security risk. And it names TikTok specifically.
What the bill does is it forces TikTok to be divested from its China-based parent company, or all app stores in the US will basically have to stop carrying it, stop updating it.
Essentially, if this bill becomes law, Chinese parent company ByteDance will be required to sell TikTok within about 6 months. If they don't, it will become illegal for companies like Apple and Google to make it available for download, meaning some hefty fines for them if they break those rules. Up to $500 for every user who accesses their website, or even up to $5,000 for every user who downloads the app. So lawmakers aren't calling it a ban.
I don't support a ban on TikTok. The legislation did not ban TikTok. It's simply a divestiture of TikTok.
But to be sure, it would make it nearly impossible for TikTok to operate in its current form in the US. And there's one pretty significant reason behind all of this.
We know that TikTok has been manipulating information. We know that they have access to Americans' private data, and we know that if asked by the Chinese Communist Party to turn that over, they are by law required to do so.
This concern about TikTok sharing data with Chinese authorities isn't new. You might remember, for example, when the app was banned from federal devices here in Canada, and also Australia and the EU. But in recent months, those concerns have gotten louder.
There are theories that basically TikTok would use the data to sort of analyze, public sentiment in the U.S. and to more worryingly to send actual propaganda towards people's phones.
You have 170 million Americans, about 45% of the country getting their news on TikTok. I mean, look, in the middle of the Cold War, we wouldn't have allowed the Soviet Union to own CNN.
Right before the vote, intelligence and law enforcement officials briefed members of Congress on the threat, which the Director of National Intelligence described as Beijing's growing attempts to expand its global covert influence. Now, we don't have access to the exact intelligence that they shared in that briefing, but we do know the director wrote in a public report recently, China is demonstrating a higher degree of sophistication in its influence activity, including experimenting with generative AI. TikTok accounts run by a PRC propaganda arm reportedly targeted candidates from both political parties during the U.S. midterm election cycle in 2022.
Once you see the intelligence reports and you understand all the stuff that China's doing behind the scenes, you're much more likely to get on board with this.
The question is that potential threat worrying enough to lawmakers that enough of them will actually vote for this? Because this isn't the first attempt to ban TikTok in the U.S.
Trouble is brewing for TikTok. The Biden administration is warning the social media platform could be banned in the U.S.
And this bill tried to do pretty much the same thing last year, but it failed after some pretty heavy lobbying from TikTok and its users.
TikTok launching an all-out lobbying effort, encouraging its users to come to its defense.
And the bill's proponents have argued that this kind of mass lobbying strategy is exactly what they're concerned about.
This company has location and personal information about millions and millions of people, many of them teenagers or kids around the United States, and at any moment it could use this to send massive propaganda on a very, very geo-targeted level.
Going back even further, in 2020, then President Donald Trump signed an executive order banning American companies from working with ByteDance. But that didn't last long.
President Biden has just issued an executive order revoking the actions of former President Trump that were targeted at TikTok.
All of that to say, this isn't over. This new bill still faces an uphill battle in the Senate. But it is the first time one of these attempts has been approved by a full chamber of Congress.
When you see an overwhelming vote like this, a huge bipartisan vote like this, which is rare in these partisan times, I think that's something the Senate has got to take notice of.
And those watching these developments closely seem to agree. This time around, it does stand a chance of becoming law.
For whatever reason, this one has garnered a lot of support. There's a certain push behind the idea that a Chinese-controlled app is one of the most popular social media companies in the US right now.
It's hard to imagine a world without this, or even this.
I really like corn.
What do you like about corn?
It's corn! A good corn that knocks. It has the juice.
Just think about the impact on the social media industry if Americans weren't on TikTok. The breakout musicians or comedians, 170 million Americans alone are on the app. That's not only a huge number of content creators, but a massive audience.
Now it's going to the Senate, and if it passes there, it's potentially bye-bye TikTok. Man, I just got on here!
But there's also a constitutional argument here that taking away the app, this place where millions of people get and pass on information, could actually violate First Amendment rights. The right to freedom of speech, the right to freedom of the press, and freedom to assemble. Earlier this month, civil rights groups wrote a letter to Congress saying that this bill is censorship, plain and simple.
If it's passed in its current form, we're confident it will be challenged in court, and applying well-established First Amendment doctrine, this ban would fail constitutional muster. It would fail constitutional scrutiny.
Just check out what happened in Montana. After the state passed a law which would have banned the app within its borders, TikTok sued the state, and the court agreed, saying the state's ban likely violates the First Amendment. Now, federal lawmakers pushing for a ban did watch all of that play out and adjust their approach. With this bill, they're avoiding the word ban altogether, calling this instead an extension of presidential authority to keep foreign governments in check.
They've sort of fixated on the divestment aspect of it. What they say is, we don't actually want to ban this. Instead, what we want to do is carve out the foreign influence. We want to take this beloved app and wrest it from foreign control so that you all can enjoy it safely.
But whether that change in language is enough, that's yet to be seen.
This bill is functionally a ban in all the ways that matter. The government can't accomplish indirectly what it is forbidden from doing directly, and that is precisely what this bill does by forcing TikTok to divest or face a ban.
These same lawmakers concerned about China have also been pretty vocal about the health impacts of TikTok, especially for young people. From record high anxiety levels to reduced attention spans to the absolute time suck. The impacts are, at this point, pretty well researched and very real.
The actual brain science behind it is that we see dopamine, which is your feel-good hormone. It is what is involved in addiction. It's what's involved in the reward circuitry of your brain. We see that it gets spiked up.
Some parents, they're reporting their kids don't have the attention span to even sit through a movie anymore, let alone read.
While those concerns aren't part of this bill, they're a big part of the conversation. And it's hard to imagine they won't be on the minds of lawmakers as they consider their votes.
When you look at the increase in depression and the increase of mental health issues in our youth, TikTok's a factor in that. And it's interesting in China, their TikTok it's aspirational, it's educational, totally different than ours.
Republican leaders have already fast-tracked this bill through the House with essentially no real debate. Now it heads to the Senate, where some have already made it clear they won't be in support. But if it does pass, Biden has said he will sign off on it.